My name is Mike Barnett, and I belong to the Tavares congregation in the Florida Mission Center. And back in 2008, we had a newly elected pastor who gathered the congregation together. It's mostly older folks. We had one child at that time, but most of the rest of the congregation were older individuals. And he basically told us that he wanted us to work on ways to grow our congregation. He said he did not want to be the pastor of a dying congregation. And so we got together, I believe it was in May of 2008, and we worked all summer. We took up the Sunday school hour, talking about ways to open our congregation to the community, things we could do for the community to get our name into the community, get people to know who we were and what we were all about. And we got to August, we got to almost the end of August. And we tossed around a lot of different ideas, but nothing really stuck. And then I remembered a Herald article from March of 2007, and it was written by Vicki Ross. Mm-hmm. She was a member of the Pittsburgh South Hills congregation, and it talked about a nature club that they had developed for the very same reason. They were talking about ways to grow their congregation and do something viable in their community. And they prayed about it and worked on it, and they came up with the idea to do a nature club, and they wrote an article in that Herald. And I remembered reading it, so I brought it almost at the very end of our discussion about growing the church. And I brought it to the pastor and his wife and showed it to him and asked, what he thought about that as a possibility. And he liked it. And then we took it to the congregation. The congregation liked it. And as things like that usually work, because I suggested it, I got to head it up. And that was okay with me because I like nature and I like kids. So our original nature club began in 2008 with the one child that we had. I believe he was probably 8 or 9 years old at the time, and some of his friends, which he invited to the nature club. So we started with borrowing from the Pittsburgh South Hills congregation model. We didn't incorporate their model in its entirety. It was quite involved. And since my wife and I were doing it primarily, we borrowed from that for some ideas and got started. And we basically, the South Hills congregation model seemed to me to be labor intensive, and we did the same thing. My wife and I picked up some of the children because this little boy that was in our church came from a very impoverished background. All of his friends lived in a very poor part of town. Parents typically did not have vehicles to travel. We went and picked them up and brought them to the nature club. So we did that for about 6 years. And a lot of kids came through the nature club that way, but it was labor intensive. In the meantime, on Amazon, I became aware of a book in 2000. It was written in 2005, and I didn't know about it until Amazon. It popped up in my feed on Amazon of books that I might be interested in. Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv, and that is in my bibliography. Basically, he wrote a book about the disconnect between children and nature that had happened around the world, but primarily he was writing about this country in the previous 30 years. So he wrote that in 2005, and there's been studies, and he quoted all the studies and wrote quite a convincing expose on the disconnect between children and nature. And it became a New York Times bestseller and changed his life. He was a journalist out of San Diego, wrote for a San Diego newspaper. And when he wrote other books, but when he wrote that book, it became a New York Times bestseller and changed his life. It is now an international bestseller. So it's actually a a very good resource on the topic of children and nature and the importance of children being exposed to nature and the natural world and how important that is for them. And then he wrote another book, which is also in my bibliography, called The Nature Principle, because he would go and speak all over the world, but primarily this country, about his first book. And adults would come up to him and get him to sign their copy of his book and say, "We need nature too." So he wrote a book called The Nature Principle, which addresses the benefits that all ages get from contact with the natural world. And it also became a bestseller, I believe. And it's started a something called the New Nature Movement. So out of the Last Child in the Woods book, an organization started up and a website called Children and Nature Network. childrenandnature.org is the website, and this sort of grassroots movement of family nature clubs began. And I was completely unaware of that when we started our nature club based on the Pittsburgh model. The family nature club model is basically to invite families with children to meet at a local park or nature preserve and just enjoy a walk in nature together. There's strength in numbers, and families, parents and grandparents that are watching their grandkids feel more comfortable in an outdoor environment many times when they're with a group. So that's the family nature club movement. So once I discovered that, we quickly switched. We had a Florida Mission Center consultant that was making the rounds of different congregations. He came and visited our congregation and saw our nature club as it had existed, with my wife and I picking kids up and bringing them to church and taking them home. And he said, "That's never going to last. You're never going to be able to keep doing that. You'll burn out." And he would have been right. So we switched to the family nature club concept, and it's much less labor intensive, and it's for that reason much more enjoyable and much more doable. How does it connect to environmental sustainability? So the Last Child in the Woods book primarily talked about the benefits that children get, and then the Nature Principle talked about the benefits that adults get from contact with the natural world, all kinds of health benefits and psychological benefits. And there's all kinds of studies that have been done since that time to recognize that scientifically. It's not just a matter of philosophy or opinions. They have scientific evidence, and all over the world it's been tested, in Japan and other places. Lowered blood pressure, lowered heart rate, lowered cortisol levels, all kinds of interesting physiological benefits just from a simple walk in the woods. The other part, which Richard Louv touched on in his first book, Last Child in the Woods, if children don't grow up with an appreciation of the natural world, they will have no interest in the natural world. And if they have no interest in the natural world as they grow into adults, they will not care about the natural world. If we don't care about what we're not interested in, we certainly don't love what we're not interested in. So his book stated that some of the predictions were dire for the environmental movement, that the environmental movement would die out with the aging members that currently are part of those organizations, National Wildlife Federation, the Nature Conservancy, and all those places that are trying to help us save our environment, would basically die out in time with their aging members if children were not helped to grow up with an equal appreciation and love for the environment. So that's our probably number two goal. Our number one goal started out to offer a community service, an outreach community service that would get our church's name in the community in a way that no one else is doing. Nobody else is doing this. And that was Vicki Ross's motivation in Pittsburgh as well. Other churches, they tried vacation Bible schools and similar things that other congregations were doing, other Christian denominations, and they had limited success. But when they went to this nature club concept, nobody is doing that anywhere in their area or ours. And so that made us unique. Now, her organization, her church, had been doing it for many more years when we started doing ours. So they had lots of years behind them, and they actually developed a reputation in their community. Everybody knows them as the Nature Church. So that's developed. So getting kids involved in the natural world is important for all of those reasons. But for the environmental future, we want kids to love nature so that they'll be interested in protecting it. Let's see, what difficulties do we have? The initial difficulty was starting with the wrong model, but I mentioned that. Once we got to the correct model, the Family Nature Club model, and involved parents then, of course, accompany their children. Parents are responsible for their children, for watching their children, and it's not my responsibility or anybody else's responsibility to watch and take care of their own children. But of course, being present, I offer what I can to support that process. Getting the word out, we set up a booth, a table at Earth Day celebrations, at nature festivals, birding festivals, wherever there was a community activity that was focused on nature. And we were fortunate in our county that our county ran something called the Wings and Wildflowers Festival for about 6 years. And we had a table there every year during the beginnings of the Family Nature Club effort in our congregation. So people would come by. It drew lots of people. Any big community festival, Earth Day festivals, typically draw lots of people, and typically those people are the types that you're looking for. They're the types of people who are interested in the environment, environmental issues, and when they learn about the Nature Club, if they have kids especially, they jump right into it. So we got most of our families through those efforts. As time went on, we got more requests from other folks that didn't necessarily have children, older folks in the community, people that were already members of local Audubon chapters and things like that. They just liked what we were doing. They wanted to join us. And of course, we don't turn anyone away, no matter their age. Let's see. So I would say that it's been very successful as an outreach to our community. So successful, in fact, that at one point, one of our local libraries wanted to start their own Family Nature Club. And one of the parents, who was a member of our nature club, gave the librarian, the children's librarian, my name. She said, "You need to get Mike Barnett involved. He would be a great addition to your program." But that didn't work out. It was limited to just the library. And so one of the benefits of our nature club is we go to a variety of parks, and we are lucky in Lake County, where I live in Florida, Central Florida, that we have lots of parks. There's no shortage of parks, city parks, county parks, state parks. We have a national forest within 40 minutes of where I live. We have a state forest also close by. We just do not have any shortage of places that we can go and visit. So there's always some new place that we're checking out. And some of the places have become favorites over the years. So we've been back to them over and over again. And always see something of interest, plants and animals. We always have a good time. In addition to our activities, the nature club activities we do this from September to May because in Florida, Central Florida, the summers are beastly hot. Now, folks up north, they would want to probably do most of their efforts during the summer when kids are out of school. But in Florida, it's just too hot. The rest of the year is great. So September through May is what we typically do. Every other Sunday morning, we meet right before church during what would normally be the Sunday school hour. As I mentioned, we had a child when we started, but he has grown up. He's in the Navy now. And so we don't have any children in our aging congregation. So during what would have been the children's Sunday school hour, the nature club was outside visiting a local park. I was going somewhere with that thought.
So let me interrupt here just a moment, Mike. Just walk us through what happens when families come to the park. You've advertised it, they have a location, everybody arrives at the park. Tell us what happens next and how it all works.
Okay, so I send out an email in between sessions. The week before we go to our outing, I will send out an email giving them the location where we're going to meet, the time we will meet, explicit directions and addresses for folks that use Google and all that and getting around. But there's always somebody that has trouble with Google. So there's a grandmom that brings her granddaughters, and I always, if she's hesitant about where we're going, I will meet her at the church parking lot, which is 5 minutes from her home, and we will drive she'll follow me with her granddaughters and my wife and I in my car. So we meet at the park, and once everybody's there, I ask them in my email to please let me know if they're coming so I know to expect them. And we won't formally start until everybody's there who's coming. Occasionally someone is not able to make it, and they will either not show up. I'll give them 10 minutes. And if they're not there 10 minutes after the start time, we'll go ahead and start. And we always start by giving thanks. I always ask the question. We gather in a circle in the parking area and at the nature preserve. And I say, who's got something they're thankful for? We always start with giving thanks. And we'll go around the group, and everybody gets to share who wants to share. And then I'll read some words of wisdom. Sometimes it's appropriate to the place we are. Sometimes it's appropriate to what I think might be some of the wildlife we might see in the park or some of the interesting sights that we might see. Other times it's just kind of apropos for where we are as a club. But I have a large collection of nature quotes that I pull from. And I'll read a quote before we head out, and then we walk. And we do not hike. Everybody, I'm a backpacker, so a lot of people describe my nature club walks as hikes. They are definitely not hikes. If you're a hiker, you'll know the difference between a nature walk and a hike. A hike is you put your backpack on and you get your equipment together and you get from point A to point B. And some go faster, some go slower, but it's all about traveling from one spot to another. That's a hike. A nature walk, on the other hand, is just kind of a stroll, a leisurely, slow-paced stroll. We are looking for interesting plants and animals. And sometimes you don't have to go more than 5 feet from where the parking lot ends, and you'll find something of interest. If you're looking carefully and closely, you'll find something in a short time. And so we don't go very far. We don't go very fast. We go pretty slow. And whenever we see something worth investigating, worth exploring, we stop and definitely take advantage of that. And of course, people have camera or have their cell phones with them and take pictures. And one of the mothers years ago created a Facebook page where she downloads pictures of the things we've seen on our walks. And anyway, anything's fair game, whatever we come across. And the interesting part of that is that I'm 5'8", and most adults are my size or taller, maybe a little shorter. But the kids, especially the young kids, are much shorter and they're closer to the ground. So they will see things that I had missed And it's always a pleasure to me to see what they find and get excited about. And lots of things we have found because they saw them and I didn't. So it's a real thrill for me to be a part of that process. When we are finished, I always give the kids some gifts, prizes, if you want to refer to them as prizes at the end. I know what the kids who come to the park, is that if they're new, I will ask their parents in an email in advance what kinds of things in nature they're interested in. So I try to accommodate their interests. If they're interested in butterflies or snakes or turtles or bears or bunnies or whatever it is, I'll try to get books on that subject. And I'm an avid thrift store shopper. So I pick up books on all the thrift stores, lots of thrift stores in where I live. And I'll pick up these books cheaply, so it doesn't cost us a tremendous amount of money. Books and whatever else. Once we got this started, people in the congregation constantly are giving me things to give away to the kids, little stuffed animals and toys and all kinds of stuff. So there's always a little something that they take home with them. And sometimes it's not even on the subject of nature. Sometimes the books, if I find out one of the kids has a special interest in some other topic, if I see something along the lines, I will pick that up in a thrift store for them. Then we go home, and I put together an email thanking all the people that joined me for the walk, and I list all of the plants and animals that we identified that I can remember, and there's so many. Sometimes I miss a few. That's why it helps to have the parent who's taking photographs with their cell phones and putting them on the Facebook page. It reminds me of some of the things that we saw that I forgot to mention in the email. And I always include a little words of wisdom quote in the emails that I send out as well, because I have pages and pages and pages of nature quotes to use for that purpose. Let's see, it says, how successful has it been with the congregation and the wider community? So one of the reasons we started, as I mentioned, was to grow our congregation. And that has been problematic. Because we're an aging congregation, I'd say almost everyone in my congregation, myself included, is retirement age or older. Most are older than retirement age. So we have no children at this time. And so there's no children's activities. There's no children's draw to get parents to bring their kids to our church. We tried that a couple of times with the Family Nature Club, families that are sort of dedicated. We have at least 4 families currently that are dedicated to the club and have been coming for many years now. 7, I'd say 7 or 8 years. But because of our aging congregation, there's not a lot of, we're sort of set in our ways, and we sort of do things the way we've always done them, and they're the way they've been done for the last 40 or 50 years, and there's no change. There's no ability, I would say, to change at this point in our congregational life. So it's just basically an old congregation. And so that part, we haven't been able to draw the families with kids to come and be an active part. So my advice to anyone who's interested in this concept and wanting to try something like this, your best bet, and I wish I had done this when my son was little, your best bet is to do this while you have some young kids in your congregation. Do it while they are young and get them to invite their friends and their friends' parents. And that is the absolute ideal way and ideal time to start a family nature club as a congregational outreach. The other advice that I would give would be to keep it simple. It's the model that we use is so simple that it's easy to do. It's not difficult at all. If you were to start to incorporate a lot of activities, if the families with their children, for instance, were to come back, say after the nature club outing. We do this on Sunday morning, as I mentioned, and in the time period of most Sunday school hours. And right after that is the church hour. And if some of those families were to come back to your church, and you wanted to do things to help them to feel welcome, that gets more involved. And my advice would be to make sure that your congregation is 100% behind that, and that they are willing to adjust whatever they need to adjust to be as welcoming to families with children as they possibly can be. Otherwise, keep it simple and just explore local parks and nature preserves, and that's a good enough community outreach service. It's a vital service, really. My other piece of advice is that it's a heck of a lot of fun. If you like kids and you like nature, this is the ideal combination of those two. And there is no better work in the church, in my humble opinion. My philosophy is if you're going to do work for the church, you might as well do something that you enjoy. And I thoroughly enjoy this. I wouldn't do it if I didn't. I get to see the world through the eyes of children. Again, relive some of my own childhood experiences in nature. I'm an old guy, so that is a really fantastic treat to be able to feel young again, watching kids explore and discover. When they get excited by some discovery, I get excited. And when I'm excited to show them something cool, they get excited. So we get excited together. And it's just fantastic. It's just a real joy.
Thank you.
So are you able to, on the website, are you able to include things like my email address and telephone for people that wanted to contact me, or if they wanted to explore this further?
I think so. We might put it with the bibliography.
Okay, that would work.
Mhm.
That would work.
They could contact you for more information or for advice or questions.
That would work, and I'd be happy to help.